Fan bases. We are all a part of one in some way or another. Whether or not that is a gaming console fan base, a movie fan base, a video game fan base, a social media influencers fan base, a television show's fan base, you get the drift. If you name it, there is more than likely a fan base involved with it, obviously. But did you know that fan bases can actually be more toxic than they might appear to be from the outside looking in, once you actually immerse yourself within them and see them for what they truly are? Here today at Cynical Apex Commentaries, I'm actually going to look deeper inside of it and give you a real insight into fan bases and the toxicity involved within them. So hang in tight and let's get to the discussion. Now, before we begin, I must say, don't try to tell me, hey, not all fan bases are like this, or don't just lump them all into one period when you're talking about toxicity, because let's face it, most fan bases, and I will even say all fan bases, have their pockets of toxicity. And no, my intention was never to say that all fan bases, well, all members of a fan base are toxic, because that would be a lie. What I am saying is that fan bases have toxicity within them. To what extent? That is determined from fan base to fan base, but it is more prevalent, as you'll find out, in the whole PlayStation versus Xbox debate, and even on social media influencers, more pertaining to the commentary community, because as much as they might say, oh, we're not trying to parlay hate onto people, or we're not trying to make people hate other creators, that is the intention of the videos, whether or not you wish to actually face the facts or not. By commenting on them, or rather what you would call critiquing them, your fan base is going to take that inch you are giving them to send the hate, and they're going to run a mile with it. Now, is that all in your control? Absolutely not, and I'm not trying to say that either. Nor is the whole Xbox versus PlayStation debate in Sony or Microsoft's control. However, you've got to admit to yourself, the fans will always try to make petty arguments, or will try to degrade someone because they either feel a sense of superiority because they play a certain console, or they like a certain influencer who critiqued another influencer. See all the hate that Jake Paul gets. Now, I'm not saying I'm a Jake Paul fan. I'm not. He's not my sort of content, and that's fine. He can do what he does, and I'll do what I do. And I'm not here to actually degrade him, and I'm not here to really degrade anyone. Rather, I'm here to talk about about the toxicity that follows a certain video when it's made on a topic like Jake Paul, or when you hear people debating Sony or Xbox. Now, I'm a PlayStation guy. I grew up with PlayStation, and it's what I've always been comfortable using. I have played the Xbox as well, and both do have their pros and their cons. However, when you actually look on Twitter or social media, as soon as the topic comes up, the toxicity comes out to play. You have the Xbox and PlayStation fanboys going at it, being like, rah rah rah, your console sucks, there's no real good exclusive on it, rah 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 rah, the gameplay sucks on Xbox comparison to PlayStation, rah rah rah. You get the drift. It's just a simple circular argument that really goes nowhere, except for trying to turn it into some sort of dick contest, or, hey, I'm just a gaming elitist who degrades those who choose not to play the console that I do. Hey, hello, people have their own choices, people have their own preferences, just like with social media content creators, and what you'll see in the comment section. You'll have people who do have valid critiques sometimes, but most of the others are following the sheep mentality, or following the herd, and just sending hate people's way. We've seen it with Emma Chamberlain several times. And the pockets of toxicity that have risen when it comes to her. They'll nitpick every single minor detail of what she does to try to spin it in a way of, hey, we shouldn't be allowing this. Hey, this is wrong. Even when it's perfectly fine, and when everything to the extent is subjective, but you're trying to make it out as if she's being objectively incorrect or objectively objectionable, which I firmly disagree with. Yes, I know this seems quite shallow, but it's just more of an overview rather than things. Now let's look deeper. You'll see it within fan bases themselves. Like, I'll use certain the Undertale fan base, which has been known for being toxic with certain gaming things and that. Now, I like Undertale. I think the retro feel that the game goes for is actually really good. Even though I personally haven't really played the game, I do know some things about the fan base because I have friends of mine who have played it. And, well, let's just say that's actually relatively tame compared to some of the arguments I've seen. And it just goes to show you that sometimes you can't really use a certain measurement in order to gauge toxicity. Rather, you've got to look at it in the scope of the fan base itself. Undertale is one of those fan bases where it's similar to Harry Potter. There's a lot of elitists, which is prevalent everywhere. But there's also those who claim not to like the toxicity, but then they play right into the toxicity themselves by arguing with those that they are claiming to be toxic. It's like, hey, you're toxic. Why would you point it out? Oh, yeah, sure. You want to say, hey, this person's toxic. But why point it out when you know that all it's going to end up being is just another circular argument and playing right into the wasteland that you claim to be opposed to? To me, that just reeks of sort of hypocrisy, and also just you trying to, after all, be the exact thing that you claim to hate. It's actually being toxic yourself when you're trying to play against it, but rather using the tactics against them. What I tend to do is I tend to try to ignore the toxicity. I tend to just try to stay in my own lane with videos like that, or with arguments like that where it just becomes all circular after a while. Yeah, sure, I'll state my point, but if you're going to try to make it into an elitist level of argument, then there's really no reason to just engage. There's no reason for me to continue arguing, and there's no reason for me to try to change your mind, because honestly, I'm really not going to. Just like you're not really going to change my mind on any topic that I do, or any point that I am making. Because after all, there is that old statement, you shouldn't know which hill you want to die on. Or you should choose the best hill that you feel that you can stand on. Where you know that your points are at least as objective as possible. I'm not going to say they're entirely objective, because you're never going to get 100% objective arguments. After all, yes, you can go by statistics and data, but there's always going to be a layer of subjectivity to each and every point that you make. And that is something that you have to accept, whether or not there is people that are going to agree or disagree with you. After all, and that is something that I have seen, that toxicity is always born from conflicting arguments, from people trying to be stubborn and steadfast in their ways that their points are correct, and then belittling those who oppose them by trying to say that they are objectively wrong or that they are going against data, when that is not always the case. Rather, they are interpreting the data in a different way to you. Maybe they are wrong. Maybe you are actually in the right when it comes to these arguments. Like, that is something that you've got to discern, and you've got to actually try to listen to their side as well as your side, and then research and use the evidence that you can see to back up your points rather than going solely off your opinion. And this is where the social media influencers come in, and the commentary channels. I think, yes, even though they do have references, yes, they do have their own clips and contexts, I feel that a lot of the commentaries are actually just opinions at the end of the day. And I think it's either both the party that is being critiqued and the critiquer's own fan bases going to war that sort of causes everything to become a cesspool and a crashing wave that it isn't supposed to be. Just take the Lieutenant Cobra versus Just Destiny situation. That all started from ponderings and opinions and then spiraled out of control because of the vicious cycle of toxicity and fan bases attacking one another and then even going after Just Destiny when Lieutenant Cobra's intentions weren't for the fan base to do that at all, nor would have he instructed them to do that. Just like most commentary community participants don't. Hey, they do even leave disclaimers. Hey, don't send hate to this sort of people. But then again, you know how fan bases work. You know how those toxic pockets work. If you give them something, if you're giving them material in which you have critiqued someone, whether or not your critiques are entirely valid, that's a different point in general. They're going to take that inch and run a mile, even against your best wishes. We know that. It's just how life is. It's just how these sort of people are. They're looking for arguments at any risk. Heck, even take the Call of Duty crowd and the toxicity it lays within there. Especially those that were on voice chat back in the days of like Modern Warfare 2. You had people screaming about mothers, about racism, about people who were playing against them, all because they were losing the game. Now, have I been toxic? Of course, admittedly, I have. It's just something that once you are immersed in fan bases, once you actually find yourself stuck within the culture, you are going to dive down that rabbit hole yourself once in a while. It's almost a certainty that it will happen, no matter, even if you try to escape it, even if you try to keep yourself disconnected from these fan bases, they will always catch up to you. They will always find a way to suck you in and force you to kind of stoop to that level in order to either get your points across or to just flat out vent frustrations and vent anger over various topics. Now, what should you do? My best advice to you, and this is something that I will admit that even I need to learn how to follow sometimes, is just walk away. Just disconnect yourself from a certain situation when you feel like it's getting to levels of toxicity where you feel like your only approach to respond to it is to actually be toxic yourself, and then just assess everything. Try to rationalize what's being said and figure out a way to point out your own views without stooping to the level that you're claiming that they're going at. Whether or not that is just by simply detaching yourself, by muting the conversation, or by turning off your console or YouTube or wherever the toxicity is for a little bit and taking a walk just to clear your mind and coming back later to just try to rationalize everything, or just stepping away from the situation in general and moving on with your day-to-day life, which is something that people tend to do. They tend to try to either cut themselves away, or you'll see people, those extremely toxic people, hang on to a certain situation and try to rope you back in at all costs. Another thing that I will admit that I myself have been guilty of, however, it is something that I am working on. It is something that I have tried to avoid doing, and just state my points, then either mute the conversation or just let it go on around me. Just let the chatter go on, let the people talk in circles before coming back to the exact same points that have been discussed time and time again. And yes, this also goes for the political community, which I forgot to mention, and I didn't really want to mention them here because they are the most toxic cesspool of them all. And I might actually do a separate video on that particular community in general. However, don't count on it, and if I do it, it will be more in a revisit of this whole Toxicity little rant, and it will probably be in like a month or so if I am to do it. Also, just as an aside, yes, part 2 of my problem with YouTube's copyright strike system, and also the fatal flaw with YouTube's guidelines in general, will be coming out either soon after this video, like 2 or 3 hours, or tomorrow morning. You can count on that. Okay, so now back to this topic. All I can give is just my views, my thoughts on Toxicity, which you're not going to avoid it. No matter what you do, no matter which fan base you join, you are always going to find yourself roped in. You are always going to find yourself encountering these pockets of toxicity. Whether or not it stems from a comment that you make, or a comment that on a website, a forum, a tweet, a YouTube video. So it's really not about embracing it either, however. Sorry, it's more about what you can do once you see it. What you can do once you sense something maybe more toxic than you envisioned it for being. What you thought was just another rational argument devolving into toxicity when more and more people become aware and try to offer their own 2 cents on the situation. I have no problems with that. Each person has the right to their own opinion, and each person can voice their opinion in a way that they see fit. That's not my point here. I'm not trying to deny you your rights to do that. I'm just saying, try to rationalize the situation. Try not to stoop to making it into an argument. Rather, see it just as a debate, a discussion between friends who are holding disagreements. And be mindful that the other person may actually be making valid points, rather than just being like, "Look, this is a joke. Rah, 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 rah. You have no basis for your points," when they actually do. Anyway, this video has been going on for long enough, and I've been rambling on and on just about my viewpoints on this. And yes, this is about to be a circular discussion. Anyway, I'm going to let you all go now, and just stay tuned for the next